Hey guys, welcome to my best competitive budget decks for 2019 video. Now that we're in the new year, I think it's a great time to sort of look over the meta and look at what are the best decks for budget players. I get questions about budget alternatives for cards all the time, what the best budget decks are, so I'm going to kind of talk about that in this video, specifically focusing on the deck aspect of those questions. All of these decks should be able to be built under $150, sometimes even less. Most of them do have opportunities for you to invest in more expensive cards to upgrade them and get them closer to their full potential over time. I think that that's a really important part of budget decks because everyone wants to be able to trade or buy cards over time and slowly upgrade their deck. I think that's one of the fun parts of Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially when you're not able to just full out buy a top meta deck. So that's going to be taken into consideration for these picks. And the first one we're going to start with, I think, is a fairly strong candidate for newer players coming back to the game, or people just looking for something really, really cheap. Crusade. So one of the main things that's attractive about Crusade is that most of the cards are commons, rares, or super rares. There's only one ultra rare in the archetype, which is Equimax. It's the Link monster that is the linchpin of the OTK combo. You need like 2 of them, I think, and they're only about $6 a piece, so not bad at all. The rest of the cards are, 50 cents, $1, maybe one of the super rares is $2. So the core engine cards are relatively cheap. As far as outside archetype cards go, you need some kaijus that are relatively inexpensive. There's some spell cards you need. Monster Reborn is not too bad. Maybe a Raigeki. Not even every Crusade build plays it. Raigeki is a little expensive. Again, like I just said, not necessarily needed though. There are also many opportunities to upgrade this deck, I think more so than pretty much every other deck that I'm going to talk about in this video. First of all, to the main deck, you can add Mech Knights, which really help with the whole OTKing aspect of the deck. That is the core idea of this deck. You go second, 1-turn kill your opponent. The core combo using Equimax sometimes isn't quite enough against larger boards, and so Mech Knights can help you get that little extra bit in to finish them off. Also, we're getting Guard Dragons and Archetype and Savage Strike at the end of this month. Crusade Guard Dragon has been a reasonably successful deck over in Japan, and I suspect that it will be reasonably successful over here as well. I think that's a really great way to take kind of the next step with this deck. If you like Crusade, learn some Guard Dragons. They will probably be a little spendy, but if you really want to take the next step into the competitive metagame, that's a great way to do so. Next up, we're going to talk about Gem Knight FTK. So it is a first turn kill with Gem Knights. You burn your opponent for 8,000 using Lady Lapis Lazuli. It's kind of a neat FTK that's been around for a little while now. It did get hit slightly by Konami putting Master Diamond to 1 on the Forbidden limited list, excuse me, I just stuttered that. However, that did not kill the FTK. So there's still some ways to do it. There are some more extra deck investments that you're going to have to make than you used to, but the only really expensive main deck card is Brilliant Fusion. The rest of the deck, and it's just Gem Knight cards, which, to be honest, they're not really used in any other deck. A lot of Gem Knight FTK's cards are pretty unique to itself. No other more popular strategies utilize many of the same cards, and that keeps the prices pretty low. The extra deck, like I said, a little more expensive than it used to be, but maybe Nightmare Unicorn, maybe Saryuja Skuldred. Those are pretty much the only really expensive ones you need. The rest of the extra deck should be pretty cheap. So I think it's a solid option if you're looking for maybe kind of an alternative win condition deck. It is a burn deck, just something a little different. Your friends will probably hate you, but it has a pretty extensive learning curve, which I think makes it fun for you to play. There's just a bunch of different variations of the FTK combo that are, it's just a blast to learn. I played that deck for a format or so I really recommend that deck. Personally, I had so much fun with it. Next, we're going to talk about True Draco. So True Draco have been around for quite a while now in many different forms. They are a stun deck with giant monsters. So if you like things with a lot of attack, Crusadia is a pretty good option, but so is True Draco. The most expensive card in the deck is Card of Demise. That's about it. Some of the other True Draco cards and traps incrementally add up, but overall the deck does not require an extra deck, which I think is the biggest reason why this deck is so budget friendly, despite some of the main deck cards being a little pricey. The extra deck for a lot of decks really makes up a large part of the cost, so eliminating that entirely can easily cut out $50 to $100 or more, so that's always fantastic. True Draco, definitely going to be for your stun players. You just want to play a bunch of floodgates, prevent your opponent from playing. I don't really personally enjoy playing it that much. I think it's a little linear, but if you don't mind a little bit of linearity, or maybe you're still kind of learning the game, coming back, maybe you want some linearity to simplify the game for you, it's sort of linear as a controller stun deck in the way that Crusade is linear as a combo aggro deck. So I think they're definitely good opposite sides of the same coin. So if you're a newer player, or you're just looking for something kind of different from a combo deck, I think True Draco is a fine way to go. Next, continuing on back to more combo-oriented decks, let's talk about Pendulum Magician. So this deck was a menace in the first part of 2018. It was the best deck of the format. It's been tamed now by the Forbidden and Limited list. Astrograph Sorcerer going to 0, and Heavy Metal Foes Electromite going to 1, being kind of the big hits on the deck. It still does a lot of what it used to. It wants to set up 2 or 3 negates on the first turn, negate whatever you're doing, and then kill you. It does so less consistently, and definitely much less resiliently. 1 disruption goes a lot further now than it used to, but as the trade-off, the deck is significantly cheaper. It's pretty unique on this list as being the only Pendulum deck that I'm going to talk about. Definitely another great combo option. I think it's sort of a middle ground between Crusadia and Gem Knight FTK. It's not as linear as Crusadia, but it doesn't have so many insane combo paths as Gem Knight FTK. I think it's a little easier to pick up. The skill floor is a little lower while still having a higher skill ceiling than Crusadia. So overall, I think it's just a solid combo deck for pretty much anyone to pick up. The main expense is going to be Mythical Beast Jackal King in the main deck, but that's only $8 and you only need like 2 copies. A big part of the reason why this deck is so cheap now is because so many of the cards got reprinted in the set Pendulum Evolution. Most of the cards are 50 cents to $1, which ultimately means that you can focus more of your money on the extra deck. And even then, most of the extra deck cards aren't that expensive, so if you want to look towards some of the more expensive extra deck cards like Borload, or again, maybe even Boral Sword, this is one of the easier decks for you to do that. Next, we're going to talk about sort of 2 at once, Altergeist and Paleozoic. They're the 2 trap control decks of the format. They run a lot of similar trap cards, which are pretty cheap. Solemn Strike isn't, worthless, but it's a pretty solid card that's not too expensive. The Paleozoic traps themselves are not that expensive. Altergeist's archetypal trap cards are not that expensive. Neither deck really runs expensive monsters. Altergeist does have Multi-Faker, which is, $6 a piece, and you need 3 of them. That's sort of whatever, though, in the grand scheme of things. Paleozoics do like to use Card of Demise like True Draco, whereas Altergeist doesn't, but does like to run more hand traps. It likes to at least have something like Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, but you need the targets for those. So some of the more expensive extra deck monsters, you're going to maybe feel like you want to pick them up so that you can use Ghost Reaper. You don't have to, though. I think in general you could probably survive with just things like Effect Veiler or Artifact Lancia. Altergeist also likes to use Secret Village of the Spellcasters. Not too expensive, but when you get all 3 copies of them, that's just another $10 stacked on top. I don't think these are the absolute cheapest options on this list. I do think Altergeist is probably, by a reasonable margin, the best deck on this list, being that it is, at full potential, the 3rd or 4th best deck of the format. In order to keep it kind of on the cheaper side, though, you can't run cards like Infinite Impermanence or Trap Trick. Those cards are where you can potentially upgrade both decks, with Altergeist and Paleozoic do like to play those cards. And those, like I said, going to be the main opportunity for you to upgrade. I definitely recommend you do so if you enjoyed the decks. Those are going to be the main things you want to be concerned about. Altergeist, again, maybe you want extra deck targets for Ghost Reaper. Extra deck is pretty cheap though. Paleo, pretty much the same situation. Totally Awesome isn't that expensive after its Megatin reprint, and it would like cards like Borreload and Borrelsword, they both would, but I would definitely say neither deck requires them. They have pretty good Thunder Dragon matchups as it is, so Borreload and Borrelsword are less necessary as they would be into some other matchups. Just overall, again, these are decks that, like Gem Knight FTK, I have played fairly extensively myself. I've enjoyed them, so I do strongly recommend them from my own personal experience. These are, I think, probably going to have more potential going into the future than True Draco, but they are slightly less linear, and I do think they require a little more game knowledge. They require more knowledge of what your opponent's cards do. So if you have if you're newer to the game, less meta knowledge, maybe you do want to opt more for the True Draco side of things, whereas if you have been playing the game for a while, or you're willing to kind of take on a lot of knowledge, you're willing to learn a lot about the game, then you can go to Altergeist or Paleozoic as decks that I think are going to have more potential going forward. Finally, I'm going to give sort of a shout out to Salomon Grates. Their structure deck comes out in the middle of February, so it's not out yet. Once it does, you can pretty much buy 3 structure decks, maybe get some other extra deck cards and slap them together, and you're going to have a pretty solid deck. So I do want to acknowledge them for that. And that makes the list. So I hope you enjoyed. If you made it this far, I'm glad that this video was informative to you, and if you guys have any other suggestions for good competitive budget decks this format, make sure to comment it down below. And with that, I will see you guys in my next video, which should probably be a discussion on Burning Abyss. Finally, I know I've been promising that. Alright, bye.